The mansion seemed perfect, until an unexpected return revealed the hidden horror. The daughter kneeling with her brother and the stepmother smiling on the couch formed the portrait of a lie. The man who thought he had everything discovered he had lost what truly mattered. In the imposing Albuquerque mansion, high up in New York City's Upper East Side neighborhood, the silence was broken only by the soft sound of a cloth rubbing the marble floor. Sophia, an 8-year-old girl, was kneeling on the living room floor, meticulously cleaning every inch of the gleaming surface while carrying her baby brother. Matthew, only 10 months old, tied to her back with an improvised cloth. Sweat streamed down her forehead as she tried not to make a sound, her eyes watchful for any movement from the Italian leather armchair, where Deborah, her stepmother, was reclining eating grapes. "Faster, Sophia. The floor is still dirty over there in the corner," Deborah commanded, spitting a grape skin onto the freshly cleaned floor. "And don't forget to clean that up, too." Sophia swallowed hard, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. "Yes, ma'am," she murmured, crawling towards the deliberately discarded grape skin. Matthew whimpered on her back, and Sophia tried to soothe him with a gentle sway, but the baby was hungry. They both were always hungry. "Shut that crying baby up or I'll have to do it myself," Deborah threatened, turning up the television volume to drown out the child's weak cry. The Albuquerque mansion, with its expansive gardens and privileged view of the city, was a true postcard. Christian Albuquerque, one of the most successful real estate businessmen in the United States, had built an empire of luxury condominiums across the country. But while he traveled from Miami to Seattle expanding his business, his children lived a nightmare under the supervision of his new wife. Only a year had passed since Felicity, Sophia's mother and Christian's beloved wife, suffered a fatal accident on Interstate 80. The pain of loss was devastating for the entire family, but especially for Sophia, who adored her mother. Christian, lost in his grief and concerned about his children's well-being, eventually found comfort in the arms of Deborah, his executive assistant at the time. The romance was swift and intense, culminating in a discreet wedding just 6 months after Felicity's passing. Initially, Deborah seemed to be the perfect solution. Attentive and affectionate when Christian was around, she won the businessman's trust, with promises of caring for his children as if they were her own. But as soon as he left on a trip, the mask fell. "Your father called. He said he'll be staying another week in Orlando, closing that deal with the investors," Deborah announced with a cruel smile on her lips. "You know what that means, don't you? More time for you to learn to be useful in this house." Sophia felt her stomach sink. Another week of hunger, of forced chores, of sleeping in the small back room that used to belong to the maid, now dismissed by Deborah under the pretext of saving money. Another week away from the toys locked in her old room. From comfortable clothes replaced by old rags, from full meals reduced to cold leftovers. Upstairs, the nursery, meticulously decorated by Felicity during her pregnancy, remained untouched, but Matthew never slept there. He shared the thin mattress in the back room with Sophia, who protected him with her own body on cold New York winter nights. "Mrs. Deborah, please," Sophia gathered courage to speak. "Matthew needs milk. He hasn't eaten since yesterday morning." Deborah's eyes narrowed. "You two have eaten enough this week. Your father doesn't send me money to waste on you." She stood up, adjusting the expensive dress she had bought with Christian's card. "And don't call me Mrs. I'm your mother now, understood?" Sophia lowered her gaze, knowing she would be taking a great risk if she challenged her. "Yes, mother." The word burned in her throat like acid. Never in her heart would that woman be her mother. Felicity, with her gentle smile and warm hugs, was and always would be her only mother. The memory of Felicity singing to her before bed, teaching her to bake cookies in the spacious kitchen, or simply sitting beside her reading stories in the garden, was what kept Sophia strong in her darkest moments. After hours of scrubbing the floor, cleaning windows and organizing books on the shelf, Sophia finally received permission to withdraw. With Matthew still tied to her back, she went to the kitchen, where she quickly hid a piece of stale bread and some leftover cheese in the pocket of her worn dress. She had learned that she needed to be smart to survive. Small food thefts were necessary to keep her and her brother alive when Deborah decided to teach them discipline through hunger. In the back room, Sophia laid Matthew on the mattress and carefully divided the smuggled food. The baby, already accustomed to receiving chewed food from his sister in the absence of infant formula, opened his mouth like a hungry bird. His eyes, so much like Christian's, momentarily sparkled with the relief of hunger. "It's going to be okay, Matthew," Sophia whispered, caressing her brother's sparse hair. "Daddy will be back soon, and then—" She didn't complete the sentence. How many times had she said that? How many times had she hoped her father would notice what was happening in his absence? But Christian always returned exhausted from his trips, spent a few hours with his children under Deborah's watchful eye, and soon left again. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months of silent suffering. Sophia learned not to cry, not to complain, to obey instantly. Her thin arms carried the weight of her brother, who was growing slowly far below the ideal weight for his age. At school, when she managed to attend, Sophia remained quiet and isolated. Teachers noticed her thinness and deep dark circles under her eyes, but Deborah's explanations about a hereditary medical condition and her position as the wife of an influential man silenced any questioning. Night fell over the Upper East Side, bringing with it the typical July chill of New York City. Sophia curled up with her brother under the single thin blanket they possessed. Tomorrow would be another day of servitude, another day pretending everything was fine when the social worker made scheduled visits, another day hoping someone would notice the impossible to hide. What Sophia didn't know was that her father, driven by an inexplicable premonition, had cancelled his meetings in Orlando and was on his way home, eager to embrace the children he loved so much. What none of them imagined was that life in the Albuquerque mansion was about to change forever. Christian, Albuquerque's private helicopter hovered over the New York metropolis when the businessman felt an inexplicable unease. At 42, Christian had built a respected real estate empire across the United States, but in recent months something had deeply troubled him. Video calls with his children seemed increasingly artificial, with Sophia always downcast and Matthew rarely appearing, supposedly sleeping. "We're almost there, sir," the pilot informed, indicating the private helipad on top of the Albuquerque Enterprises commercial building. "Change of plans, Rodrigo. Let's go directly to my house," Christian ordered, checking his watch. It was only 2 in the afternoon, a time when he would normally be immersed in meetings. "I haven't told anyone I'm coming back." The pilot nodded, adjusting the route to the Upper East Side. Christian took a deep breath, trying to calm the growing anxiety in his chest. Since he had met Deborah at the office, everything had happened very quickly. She emerged as a safe harbor amidst the emotional turmoil after losing Felicity. Efficient, organized, and seemingly devoted to his children, Deborah seemed like the answer to all his concerns. The marriage, held just 6 months after Felicity's passing, was criticized by many friends and family members, especially by Louisa, his sister-in-law and Felicity's sister, who never hid her distrust of the new wife. But Christian, blinded by gratitude and the need to fill the void left by his wife, ignored all warning signs. Now, as the helicopter landed in the mansion's spacious garden, Christian felt a tightening in his heart. In recent months, Sophia's calls had become increasingly short and less frequent. His daughter, who used to talk endlessly about school and her drawings, now responded only with monosyllables, and Matthew, who had recently turned 10 months old, seemed smaller in the few photos Deborah sent. "Thank you, Rodrigo. You can go. I'll call when I need to return," Christian said, walking towards the house. The Albuquerque mansion, with its contemporary architecture and imposing facade, seemed strangely silent for a Thursday afternoon. Christian used his key to enter, preferring not to announce his arrival. The entrance hall, with its Italian marble floors and artwork selected by Felicity, remained impeccable. But something was different. The familiar smell of freshly baked cookies that used to permeate the house when Felicity was alive had been replaced by an artificial air, freshener scent. Christian advanced silently down the corridor, leading to the main living room. It was then that he heard Deborah's voice, in a tone he had never witnessed before, cold-cutting, cruel. "Not finished yet? I told you I want this floor shining before your father comes back next week. If he sees a single scratch, you know what happens to your little brother, don't you?" Christian froze. A shiver ran down his spine as he approached the living room door, now ajar. The scene his eyes captured paralyzed him completely. Sophia, his 8-year-old princess, was kneeling on the floor, scrubbing the surface with her small reddened hands. On her back, Precariously tied with a piece of fabric was Matthew, pale and visibly thinner than he should have been. Deborah was comfortably settled on the leather sofa, watching a reality show on the huge smart TV, while eating grapes and occasionally spitting the skins onto the freshly cleaned floor, laughing as she watched Sophia hastily clean each one. "Faster, you useless girl. And that baby won't stop whimpering. Didn't I just feed you both yesterday?" So ungrateful. Christian's vision blurred. Blood pulsed in his temples as he tried to process the absurd scene before him. His daughter, heiress to one of the largest fortunes in the United States, was being treated like a servant. His son, still a baby, looked malnourished and sick. "What is going on here?" Christian's voice echoed through the room, causing everyone to freeze. Sophia looked up, her eyes wide in a mix of fear and relief. Deborah dropped the wine glass she was holding, staining the Persian rug Christian had brought from a trip to the Middle East. "Darling, what a wonderful surprise." Deborah quickly changed her expression to a radiant smile, getting up to hug her husband. "We weren't expecting you today." Christian remained motionless, his eyes fixed on his daughter and son. "Sophia, come here," he called, his voice trembling with contained emotion. The girl hesitated, looking nervously at Deborah, who maintained her plastic smile, but whose eyes conveyed a clear threat. "Sophia now," Christian insisted, taking a step towards his daughter. With difficulty, Sophia stood up, still carrying Matthew on her back. She slowly approached her father, head bowed as if fearing punishment. Christian knelt, bringing himself to his daughter's eye level. Gently, he touched her chin, lifting her face. What he saw broke his heart. Deep dark circles, sunken cheeks, chapped lips. Carefully, he took Matthew from his sister's arms. The baby was lethargic, his breathing shallow, his skin clammy to the touch. "My God, what happened to you two?" he whispered, more to himself than to his children. "Christian, dear, the children are just a little unwell. Matthew caught a cold, and Sophia insists on taking care of him. Even when I tell her she needs to rest," Deborah quickly interjected, positioning herself beside her husband. "I was going to take them to the doctor today." "Sophia," Christian completely ignored his wife, focusing on his daughter. "Tell Daddy the truth. What is happening in this house when I'm not here?" Sophia looked at Deborah, who subtly squeezed her fingers as a sign of threat. The girl trembled visibly. It's all fine, Daddy," she murmured. But her voice failed on the last word. It was then that Matthew, as if sensing his father's presence, began to cry, a weak cry, almost a whimper, which contrasted dramatically with the strong, healthy crying Christian remembered. "He needs to eat," Sophia couldn't hold back. "Please, Daddy, he's very hungry." Deborah's expression hardened for a second, before quickly returning to her mask of maternal concern. "I just fed him a little while ago, darling. He must have colic. I'll prepare that tea the pediatrician recommended." Christian stood up, holding Matthew firmly against his chest, his eyes, now hard as granite, fixed on Deborah. "Sophia, take your brother and go to your room. They'll be up in a minute," he instructed, his voice controlled but loaded with a rage he struggled to contain. "They're sleeping in the back room, dear," Deborah informed sweetly. "I thought it best to keep them close to the kitchen to make Matthew's night feedings easier." Christian closed his eyes for a moment, trying to control his growing anger. The back room? That tiny room of the former maid. Sophia took Matthew again and began to move away towards the corridor. "Sophia, wait," Christian called. "You're not sleeping in your own rooms." The girl looked at her own feet, unable to lie, but also unable to tell the truth in front of Deborah. "Darling, I can explain," Deborah began, touching Christian's arm, who recoiled as if burned. "Sophia, please, take your brother to my office and wait there," Christian ordered. "Now." As soon as the children left, Christian turned to Deborah, his eyes blazing with fury. "What have you done to my children?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Deborah crossed her arms defensively. "I'm taking care of them as best as possible, considering you're never present. Do you know how hard it is to raise two children alone? One of them still a baby. They are malnourished, Deborah. Sophia is being forced to clean the house like a maid. And where are all the staff? I dismissed most of them. I thought it would be better to save money since the real estate crisis is affecting your business," Deborah replied coldly. "What crisis?" Christian frowned. "The company has never been so financially sound." Deborah hesitated for a moment, realizing her mistake. Well, you always complain about expenses, and I thought that... Don't lie to me. Christian raised his voice for the first time. I send more than enough money every month. Where is it being spent? Christian's cell phone vibrated in his pocket. It was a notification from his banking app, an alert of a transfer from his joint account with Deborah to an unknown account. Another lie exposed. In the office, Sophia sat in the large chair, cradling Matthew in her arms. For the first time in months, a small flame of hope lit up in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was coming to an end. The office door opened abruptly, making Sophia instinctively flinch. Christian entered, his face a mask of worry and guilt. Quickly he knelt before his children. Sophia, please tell me the truth now. What has been happening here while I'm away? The girl looked at the ajar door, fearing Deborah might be listening. Christian noticed the fear in his daughter's eyes and closed the door, locking it. She can't hear us now. We're safe here, he assured, taking Sophia's small, calloused hands in his. Please, Princess, I need to know. Sophia's eyes filled with tears she had held back for months. She's mean, Daddy, she finally whispered. She doesn't give us proper food. Makes us sleep in that small cold room. Locked all my toys away. Says if I tell you, she'll send Matthew away to a place where we'll never see him again. Every word was like a knife to Christian's heart. How could he have been so blind? How had he not noticed the signs during his brief visits? And Matthew? He asked, looking at his son, who was breathing with difficulty in Sophia's lap. She hardly ever gives him milk. Says it's too expensive. I tried to give him some of my food, but... Sophia couldn't finish. The sobs she had held back for months finally escaped, shaking her fragile body. Christian pulled his daughter into his arms, hugging her and the baby with all the strength he could muster without hurting them. Forgive me, Sophia. Forgive me for not realizing sooner, he murmured, his own voice choked with emotion. This ends today. You will never go through this again, I promise. Picking up the phone, Christian quickly dialed. Dr. Maurice? It's Christian Albuquerque. I need you to come to my house now. It's an emergency with my children. After hanging up, he made another call. Mrs. Zelda? It's me, Christian. Can you come back to work here today? Yes, now. It's urgent. Sophia watched her father with a mix of relief and apprehension. Mrs. Zelda was the housekeeper who had cared for them since before Matthew's birth, dismissed by Deborah shortly after the wedding on the grounds of insubordination. She's going to take care of you while I sort this situation out, Christian explained, caressing his daughter's face. Now tell me everything, Sophia. Every detail. Over the next hour, while they waited for the doctor and the housekeeper, Sophia poured out her heart. She spoke of days without adequate food, cold nights in the back room, constant humiliations, threats. She revealed how Deborah forced her to clean the entire house while carrying Matthew on her back, how she deliberately spat on the clean floor, how she hid the presents Christian sent to the children. She says you don't really love us, Sophia said at one point, making Christian freeze. She says you only come home because you need to pretend to be a good father for others to see, but that you actually prefer to be away from us. The businessman felt something break inside him. How dared Deborah poison his children's minds like that? How dared she try to destroy the sacred bond between father and children? The doorbell rang, announcing the doctor's arrival. Christian picked Matthew up and, holding Sophia's hand, walked towards the office door. Stay behind me, he instructed before unlocking it. In the corridor, they found Deborah, who had evidently been trying to listen to the conversation. Her face was contorted in an expression of anger that quickly turned to concern when she noticed Christian's presence. Darling, I was so worried. Why did you lock the door? We need to talk about all this. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Later, Deborah, Christian replied coldly. The doctor has arrived to examine the children. Doctor? Deborah feigned surprise. But it's not necessary, dear. I told you it's just a passing cold. We don't need to bother Dr. Maurice at this hour. Ignoring her completely, Christian led his children to the entrance, where Dr. Maurice Reynolds, the family's trusted pediatrician for years, waited with a worried expression. Christian, what happened? The doctor asked, immediately noticing the children's precarious state. I need you to examine them now, Maurice. Right here, if possible. The doctor nodded, his professional expression barely concealing his shock at seeing Sophia so thin and Matthew so lethargic. They all went to the living room where Dr. Morris conducted a preliminary examination. Malnutrition, he gravely diagnosed after a few minutes. Both of them. The baby is severely dehydrated as well. He looked directly at Christian. They need immediate attention. I recommend Matthew be admitted to the hospital. Hospitalization, Deborah interjected, her voice shrill. That's completely unnecessary. He ate just today. Dr. Morris gave her a frosty look. Madam, this baby has not received adequate nutrition for days, possibly weeks. His condition is serious. At that moment, the doorbell rang again. Mrs. Zelda, a 60-year-old woman with a determined expression, hurried in as soon as the door was opened. My goodness, she exclaimed upon seeing Sophia, rushing to hug the girl she had practically raised. What have they done to you, my little one? The housekeeper's eyes fixed on Deborah with a fury that made the younger woman take a step back. I knew it, Mrs. Zelda murmured to Christian. I tried to warn you when she fired me. Christian closed his eyes briefly, recalling the housekeeper's words when she was dismissed. That woman doesn't like the children. Mr. Christian, don't make this mistake. Words that he, blindly trusting his new wife, had completely ignored. Zelda, please take the children upstairs. Sophia needs a warm bath and clean clothes, and pack a bag with essentials for Matthew. I'm taking him to the hospital with Dr. Morris. Consider it done, boss. I'll take care of my girl, the woman assured, giving Deborah a scornful look before guiding Sophia upstairs. As soon as they were alone in the room, only Christian, Deborah, and the doctor, the businessman turned to his wife. You have 10 minutes to get out of my house, he declared, his voice low but loaded with a controlled fury that made the doctor discreetly step away to give them privacy. What? Deborah laughed nervously. You can't be serious. I'm your wife. Not for long, Christian assured. My lawyer will be in touch to discuss the terms of the divorce. If you cooperate, perhaps I won't sue you for child abuse. Deborah's mask fell completely, her face contorted in an expression of pure hatred. You can't just discard me like this. I'm entitled to half of everything you own. We have a prenuptial agreement in case you forgot, Christian reminded coldly. And I have more than enough proof that you diverted money from our joint accounts. Not to mention what you did to my children. Deborah took a step forward, her body tense like a snake ready to strike. You think you're going to get rid of me so easily? You think I'll leave with nothing, after putting up with those unbearable children for almost a year? Watch what you say, Deborah, Christian warned, his control hanging by a thread. That stupid girl is just like her mother, a weak and whiny. And that baby never stops screaming. You should thank me they're still alive. Before Christian could respond, a sound on the stairs caught his attention. Sophia was there, trembling, having clearly heard every word. Beside her, Mrs. Zelda looked horrified. Sophia, go back upstairs, Christian gently pleaded, but it was too late. You hate Mommy? Sophia asked, her small voice almost inaudible. You hate us? Deborah laughed, a cold, cruel laugh. Your mother was in my way, just like you and your brother are. Christian should have been with me from the start, not with that pathetic woman. A deadly silence fell over the room. Christian felt his blood run cold at the implication of those words. What did you mean by that? He asked slowly. Deborah smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nothing, just that everything would be easier if she had never existed. Mrs. Zelda quickly covered Sophia's ears and led her away. Christian advanced towards Deborah, his face pale with contained fury. Get out of my house now, he ordered through clenched teeth. Before I forget, I'm a civilized man. This isn't over, Christian, Deborah threatened, grabbing her purse. You'll regret this. I'm only sorry I didn't see your true character sooner, he replied. Now get out. While Matthew received initial care at St. Jude's Hospital, Christian couldn't stop thinking about Deborah's ambiguous words about Felicity. Sitting in the chair beside his son's bed, he watched the doctors working to rehydrate him and restore his nutritional balance. Sophia slept curled up in a nearby armchair, exhausted after months of constant tension. Mr. Albuquerque, Dr. Lucy, the responsible physician, interrupted his thoughts. May we speak for a moment? Christian nodded, following her into the corridor. Not before checking that Sophia was still asleep. Your son is responding well to treatment, but the malnutrition is severe, the doctor explained, consulting the chart. There are signs of prolonged neglect, As a pediatrician, I am obliged to ask, were you aware of the situation? Shame pierced Christian like a spear. No, he admitted, his voice choked. I travel constantly for work. My wife was responsible for their care. I believed they were fine. The doctor observed him with an evaluating gaze, as if deciding whether he was an accomplice or a victim. I understand. I must inform you that cases like this are normally reported to Child Protective Services, CPS. Do whatever is necessary, Christian replied firmly. My only concern now is my children's recovery. At that moment his cell phone vibrated. It was Richard, his lawyer and longtime friend. I need to take this, he explained to the doctor, who nodded and returned to the room. Richard, any news? Christian, it's worse than we imagined. The lawyer's tense voice sounded from the other end. Deborah didn't leave the mansion as you ordered. When security tried to escort her, she said she had the right to retrieve her belongings. Apparently she took advantage to take documents from your office, jewelry and what, Richard? She's alleging at the police station that you assaulted her. She secured a restraining order against you and is giving interviews to tabloids accusing you of domestic violence. Christian felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. That's absurd. The doctor was there the whole time. Yes, but she claims it happened after he left. She has bruises, Christian. I don't know how she got them, but it looks convincing. My God, Christian ran a hand through his hair, stunned. She plans to destroy me. There's more, Richard continued, hesitant. She's insinuating to the press that you are also neglectful of the children, that the blame for their condition is yours, and that she tried to help them. But you prevented her from interfering with your parenting methods. Fury seized Christian. That's completely insane. I have the testimony of the doctor, the housekeeper, and my children's physical state proves she's distorting everything, Richard interrupted. She says you kept the children isolated when you were home, and that she wasn't allowed to feed them properly. That you obsessively controlled every aspect of family life and treated her like a prisoner. Christian closed his eyes, trying to control his breathing. Who would believe that? Enough to cause damage to your public image. The New York Times has already published an article. They're calling you the evil magnate and questioning how a man who builds empires can't take care of his own children. I need you here. Richard, immediately. I'm on my way to the hospital. And Christian? Try to stay calm. That's exactly what she wants, for you to lose control. After hanging up, Christian returned to the room. Sophia had woken up and was watching her brother with worried eyes. Daddy? Will Matthew be okay? Christian sat beside his daughter, pulling her into a tight hug. Yes, Princess. The doctors are taking very good care of him. Where's Deborah? Sophia asked, her eyes reflecting fear. She won't hurt you ever again, Christian assured, kissing the top of his daughter's head. I promise. What Christian couldn't promise was that Deborah wouldn't hurt him. In the following hours, his phone didn't stop ringing. Journalists, business partners, even his secretary, all wanting clarification on the bombshell accusations circulating in the media. Richard arrived at the hospital bringing more alarming news. Deborah had given an exclusive interview to 60 Minutes, one of the most watched TV programs in the United States. Through fake tears, she described an unrecognizable Christian, violent, controlling, negligent with his children. She has photos, Christian, Richard explained, showing printed images. Manipulated, obviously, but convincing to those who don't know the truth. The images supposedly showed Christian ignoring his children, shouting at Sophia, preventing Deborah from feeding Matthew. All fabricated, but with enough detail to seem plausible. How did she get these? Christian asked, horrified. Apparently Deborah has a cousin who works with digital editing. The photos are good enough to fool the general public, but they wouldn't stand up to serious forensic analysis. This is insane, Christian murmured. Why is she doing this? Money, revenge, or both? Richard replied darkly. But we have a trump card. The medical truth is incontestable. The state of your children, documented by the doctors, directly contradicts her narrative. As they discussed legal strategies, a nurse hurried in. Mr. Albuquerque, there's a woman insisting on seeing the children. Says she's their aunt. Christian immediately stood up. Louisa, let her in, please. Seconds later, Louisa Mendoza, Felicity's sister, stormed into the room. At 38, she was the living image of her deceased sister, The same wavy, brown hair, the same expressive eyes. But where Felicity's gaze always conveyed serenity, Louisa's now emanated fury. "I warned you, Christian. I warned you about that woman," she exclaimed, before noticing Sophia and immediately moderating her voice. "My God, Sophia!" Louisa ran to hug her niece, tears streaming down her face. "What did she do to you, my angel?" "Aunt Lou." Sophia clung to her aunt as if her life depended on it. She was the first person other than her father to show true affection in months. Louisa turned to the hospital crib where Matthew was sleeping, and her face paled at the sight of the baby's condition. "How could you let this happen, Christian?" "I didn't know, Louisa," he replied, guilt evident in his voice. "I swear to God I didn't know." Louisa took a deep breath, controlling her anger. "I saw the news. That viper is destroying you in the media." "We're handling it," Richard assured, "but we need to act quickly." "Deborah isn't just mean, Christian," Louisa said, her gaze intense. "She's calculating. All of this seems too planned." "What do you mean?" "Remember when Felicity started to suspect someone was sabotaging her projects at the company? How important documents mysteriously disappeared whenever she was close to closing a major deal?" Christian frowned. "Yes, but that was over 2 years ago. And we never found out who it was." "Because you were looking in the wrong place," Louisa stated. "Felicity suspected Deborah. She told me a few weeks before the accident." "Deborah?" Christian seemed incredulous. "But she didn't even work directly with Felicity." "No, but she had access to files as an executive assistant in the department. Felicity was gathering evidence, Christian. She believed Deborah had a fixation on you and was trying to sabotage her." The revelation hit Christian like a punch to the gut. He remembered the last months of Felicity's life, her growing paranoia, her insistence that someone wanted to harm her. The discussions about Deborah always present at company events, always offering help when Christian was overwhelmed. "You think she—" Christian couldn't complete the sentence. Louisa looked at Sophia, who was distractedly playing with a doll her aunt had brought. "Not here," she murmured meaningfully. Christian nodded, understanding. "Richard, can you stay with the children for a moment? We need to talk in the corridor." Once out of Sophia's earshot, Louisa continued, "I have no proof, Christian, but Felicity's accident always seemed strange to me. The highway was dry, she was an excellent driver. The car had been serviced that same week. Investigators concluded it was brake failure," Christian recalled. "Yes, an inexplicable failure in a new, recently serviced car." Louisa stared at him firmly. "And who suggested that specific garage for the service?" Christian felt a chill run down his spine. "Deborah. She said it was where her brother worked and that they would give a special price." "Exactly. And curiously, that brother disappeared shortly after the accident. No one saw him at the garage again." The suspicion was so monstrous that Christian initially wanted to reject it. But the pieces began to fit together in a terrible way. Deborah's interest in him even before Felicity's departure, the speed with which she approached after the loss, the insistence on a hurried marriage, the gradual isolation of the children, the constant manipulation. "My God, Louisa," Christian leaned against the wall, feeling his legs weaken. "You think she—" "I can't say for sure," Louisa replied cautiously, "but I believe you should investigate. And if I'm right, Christian, she won't stop here. Deborah isn't just a cruel opportunist. She's dangerous." As if to confirm Louisa's words, Christian's phone vibrated again. It was a message from Mrs. Zelda. "Mr. Christian, someone broke into the mansion. They broke several things, took documents, and spread paint on all of Mrs. Felicity's photos. The police are here, but they said they can't do anything because Mrs. Deborah showed up with a court order saying she has the right to remove belongings from the house. Please come back soon." Christian showed the message to Louisa and Richard. The lawyer immediately made a call. "I'll send our private security team to protect the house," he assured, "and we need to speed up the process of contesting that fraudulent restraining order." "Deborah is playing to destroy," Louisa commented, her face pale with worry. "She wants everything. Your money, your reputation, and maybe even my children," Christian completed, a new fear rising in his heart. "Do you think she would try to take them? After what I saw today, I think she's capable of anything." Suddenly, an alert sounded on all their cell phones simultaneously. It was a breaking news notification from CNN. "Businessman accused of domestic violence may lose custody of children." Court evaluates urgent request from Stepmother. The war declared by Deborah was just beginning, and Christian now knew he faced a much more dangerous adversary than he had ever imagined. The next morning, as the first rays of sun lit up the hospital room, Christian watched his children sleep. Sophia had refused to leave her brother's side, insisting on sharing the small hospital bed with him. The scene broke his heart, both for the demonstration of love and for the evidence of the shared trauma the siblings endured. The previous night had been chaotic. After the discovery of Deborah's emergency custody request, Richard had mobilized a full team of lawyers to contest it. The accusation was absurd. According to documents presented by Deborah, Christian had deliberately neglected his children, using business trips as an excuse to abandon them, and was now trying to incriminate the stepmother to cover up his own mistakes. How can she be so cynical? Christian asked Richard, who had just arrived with a stack of documents. Her accusing me of exactly what she did. It's a common strategy in cases like this, the lawyer explained, arranging the papers on the small table in the room. Attack first, distort reality, and create an alternative narrative before the truth comes out. And the press buys that version without questioning? Unfortunately, a sensational story about an abusive millionaire businessman sells more than the complex truth. Richard sighed, adjusting his glasses. But we have something she doesn't: irrefutable medical evidence. At that moment, Sophia woke up, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Seeing her father and Richard talking in low voices, she quickly sat up. "Good morning, Princess." Christian smiled, approaching to kiss his daughter's forehead. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Sophia replied, though dark circles still marked her childish face. "Matthew slept all night without crying." "That's great," Christian said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Sophia, Uncle Richard and I need to talk about some important things. Aunt Louisa will be here to stay with you both soon, okay?" Sophia nodded, but her eyes revealed concern. "It's about Deborah, isn't it?" "Is she coming back?" "No, darling. She will never hurt you again," Christian assured, holding his daughter's hands. "But she's saying some things that aren't true, and we need to resolve this." "What things?" Christian exchanged a look with Richard, unsure how much he should reveal. "She's saying your father doesn't take good care of you," Richard explained gently, "and that she tried to help but he wouldn't let her." Sophia frowned, indignant. "That's a lie. Daddy always sent presents and called every day. It was she who wouldn't let us talk to him properly. She who hid the presents and said Daddy had forgotten about us." Christian felt a lump in his throat. "Sophia, would you mind telling this to other people? People who can help us make sure Deborah never comes near you again?" The girl hesitated, fear evident in her eyes. "She'll get angry. She said if we told anything, she'd send Matthew away." "She can't do anything to you now," Christian assured. "I promise. You are protected." At that moment, the room door opened and Louisa entered, accompanied by a middle-aged woman, formally dressed, with a gentle but professional expression. "Good morning," Louisa greeted, kissing her niece and her brother, who was still sleeping. "Christian, this is Dr. Marianne Summers from Child Protective Services. She would like to speak with Sophia." Christian stood up to greet the woman. "Thank you for coming. I know the situation is delicate." Dr. Marianne nodded. "Cases like this require special care, Mr. Albuquerque. We need to hear the children without influencing them in any way." "I understand perfectly. Sophia is willing to talk." He turned to his daughter. "Princess, Dr. Marianne wants to ask you some questions about what happened at home with Deborah. You can answer truthfully without fear. I'll be right outside." Sophia grabbed her father's hand. "Can't you stay?" The CPS counselor gently intervened. "It's better if we talk just the two of us first, Sophia. Then we can call your father back. Is that okay?" After a moment of hesitation, Sophia nodded. Christian, Richard, and Louisa stepped out into the corridor, leaving the two alone. "Do you think she'll be able to speak?" Louisa asked, worried. "Sophia is stronger than we imagine," Christian replied. "She protected her brother during all these months. If anyone can expose the truth, it's her." While they waited, Richard updated Christian on the latest developments. The security team had managed to prevent Deborah from causing more damage to the mansion, but not before she took several valuable items, including family jewelry that belonged to Christian's mother and personal documents. Media coverage remained unfavorable, although some outlets were already beginning to question Deborah's version, especially after the hospital publicly confirmed the children's state of malnutrition. "We have a preliminary hearing scheduled for tomorrow," Richard informed. "The judge will decide on temporary custody and the restraining order." "What if the judge rules in her favor?" Christian asked, concern evident in his voice. "That won't happen," Richard firmly assured. "We have medical reports, witnesses, and now, I hope, Sophia's testimony." After almost an hour, the room door opened, and Dr. Marianne emerged with a grave expression. "Mr. Albuquerque, may we speak privately?" Christian followed the counselor to a small empty waiting room at the end of the corridor. "What Sophia told me is deeply disturbing," Dr. Marianne began, consulting her notes. "Forced malnutrition, isolation, child labor, psychological threats. We rarely see such a systematic case of abuse in high-income families." "I had no idea," Christian murmured, guilt consuming him. "I traveled constantly, but I called every day. Deborah controlled those calls, apparently edited messages, prevented the children from speaking freely with me." Dr. Marianne observed him attentively. "Sophia mentioned that. She also spoke about how Mrs. Deborah insisted that you didn't love your children, that you had abandoned them with her. That's absurd. My children are everything to me." "I believe you, Mr. Albuquerque. The bond between Sophia and you is evident." She vehemently defended her father, describing how Mrs. Deborah intercepted gifts, hid letters, and even falsified messages to create distance between you. Christian took a deep breath, trying to control the rage building inside him. "What happens now?" "I will present my report to the judge before tomorrow's hearing. Based on what I've seen and heard, I will strongly recommend that custody remain exclusively with you, and that a restraining order against Mrs. Deborah be maintained." For the first time in days, Christian felt a wave of relief. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," the counselor warned. "Cases like this are rarely simple. Your wife has resources and seems determined to fight. Furthermore," she hesitated briefly, "Sophia mentioned something concerning about Mrs. Deborah having friends in the police and judiciary. Is that true?" Christian frowned. "She always boasted about her contacts, but I never took it seriously. I thought it was just to impress. Well, it would be prudent to consider that possibility. I suggest that you and your children not return to the mansion for now. Find a safe location, preferably not registered in your name." The suggestion surprised Christian. "Do you think we are in physical danger?" Dr. Marianne closed her folder, her gaze serious. "Mr. Albuquerque, people who abuse children rarely limit themselves to one type of abuse. The cruelty demonstrated, combined with sophisticated manipulation and the immediate smear campaign, suggests an extremely dangerous profile. As a precaution, I strongly recommend you take extra security measures." Upon returning to the room, Christian found Sophia chatting animatedly with a young nurse, with dark skin and curly hair tied in a bun, who was checking Matthew's vital signs. "Daddy," Sophia called, genuinely smiling for the first time in a long time. "This is Camilla. She brought me pudding hidden last night." The nurse smiled, slightly embarrassed. I couldn't resist. She kept looking at my pudding so longingly during my break. "Thank you for taking care of her," Christian said. "Genuinely grateful." "Just doing my job," Camilla replied, adjusting Matthew's IV. "Your son is responding very well to treatment. Nutrient levels are normalizing, and dehydration is under control. When can we take him home?" "Probably in 2 or 3 days if he continues to improve at this rate." After the nurse left, Richard pulled Christian aside in the room. "I just received some disturbing information," the lawyer murmured. "The judge assigned to our case is Judge Oswald Miller. And that's bad because he's known for favoring women in custody disputes, especially when there are allegations of domestic violence and—" Richard hesitated. "Sources informed me that he and Deborah know each other socially. They attend the same charity events." Christian felt his stomach sink. Could that affect his decision? Legally, he should recuse himself due to a conflict of interest. But if he doesn't do it voluntarily, can we request his removal? We'd need to prove the conflict, which is difficult in such a short time. Our best bet is to present such compelling evidence that he has no choice but to rule in our favor, regardless of his personal inclinations. The room door opened again. this time revealing Nurse Camilla, who returned with a worried expression. "Mr. Albuquerque, there's a woman at the reception insisting on seeing the children. Says she's their stepmother." Christian exchanged alarmed glances with Richard. "Deborah is here?" "How did she know?" "I don't know, sir. But she's not alone. She has a cameraman with her and is threatening to make a scene if she's not allowed in." "A cameraman?" Louisa repeated, incredulous. "She brought the press?" "Classic manipulation tactic," Richard commented bitterly. "Create a scene for the cameras where she appears to be prevented from seeing the children she loves." Sophia, who had heard everything, began to tremble. "Don't let her in, Daddy, please." Christian hugged his daughter protectively. "She won't get near you. I promise." Turning to the nurse, he asked, "Is there another exit from this floor?" Camilla nodded. "The emergency stairwell at the end of the corridor. I can take you through there." "Please." Christian looked at Richard. "Can you deal with Deborah while we get the children out of here?" "Leave it to me," the lawyer assured. "I'll keep everyone distracted at the reception." As Richard headed to the main entrance, Christian, Louisa, and Nurse Camilla prepared to transport Matthew. The baby, still connected to an IV, needed to be moved carefully. "We have a transfer ambulance waiting in the back parking lot," Camilla informed, to Christian's surprise. "How did you—" When Dr. Lucy learned the stepmother was here, she anticipated this might happen. "The ambulance will take them directly to Mount Sinai Hospital, where a room is already being prepared. It's a hospital with much stricter security." Christian looked at the nurse with renewed gratitude. "Thank you." "I don't know how to thank you." Camilla smiled, helping to place Matthew on a portable stretcher. "Just take good care of these children. They've already been through things no child should have to endure." As they moved silently down the corridor towards the emergency stairwell, Sophia held her father's hand tightly, her eyes vigilant at every sound. In the back parking lot, as promised, an ambulance waited with its engine running. "Aren't you coming with us?" Sophia asked Camilla, reluctant to leave her new friend. "I can't, dear. I need to stay and help your father's lawyer buy time." She knelt down, getting to the girl's eye level. "But I promise to visit you at the other hospital as soon as my shift ends." Sophia impulsively hugged the nurse, who returned the gesture with tenderness. "Thank you for the pudding," the girl murmured. "You're welcome, little warrior," Camilla replied with tears in her eyes. "Take care." As the ambulance discreetly left the hospital through the back, Richard faced Deborah at the reception. The woman, impeccably dressed and made up to hide any imperfections, posed dramatically for the cameras, strategic tears streaming down her face. "I just want to see the children I helped raise," she pleaded to the reporter. "It's my right as a mother." "Madam, please respect hospital rules," the security guard requested, visibly uncomfortable with the situation. That's when Deborah's phone rang. Seeing the name on the screen, she stepped away from the cameras to answer. "What? What do you mean they're not here anymore?" Her face contorted in fury. "Find out where they went. Now!" Across the city, the ambulance headed towards Mount Sinai Hospital, where a new phase of the battle was about to begin. Courtroom 12 of the Manhattan Civil Court buzzed with reporters, lawyers and curious onlookers when Christian entered, accompanied by Richard and two more lawyers from his legal team. Deborah was already there, sitting on the opposite side wearing a discreet grey dress, hair pulled back in an austere bun, and an expression of suffering meticulously studied to appear authentic. Beside her, a renowned lawyer known for defending celebrities in media scandals whispered strategies in her ear. 3 days had passed since the hospital escape. Matthew, now under intensive care at Mount Sinai Hospital, showed significant improvement. Sophia remained by her brother's side, protected by private security guards hired by Christian. Louisa hadn't left her niece's side for a minute, determined to ensure no harm would befall them again. Meanwhile, the media battle intensified. Deborah presented new evidence against Christian, messages supposedly sent by him ordering her to limit the children's food as a form of discipline. Obviously falsified, but convincing enough to feed sensationalist tabloids. "Stay calm," Richard murmured, noticing the tension in Christian's jaw. That's exactly what she wants, to provoke a reaction that confirms her narrative. Judge Oswald Miller entered the room, a middle-aged man with a severe expression. After the initial formalities, he announced, "This is a preliminary hearing to determine temporary custody of the minors. Sophia Albuquerque, 8 years old, and Matthew Albuquerque, 10 months old, as well as to evaluate the maintenance of the restraining order requested by Mrs. Deborah Albuquerque against Mr. Christian Albuquerque. Let's begin. Deborah's lawyer stood first, delivering an eloquent speech about a dedicated woman who tried to help children neglected by an absent father, only to be assaulted and defamed when she exposed the truth. Your Honor, he concluded dramatically, Mrs. Deborah fears not only for her physical safety, but for the integrity of the children she has learned to love as her own. She requests temporary custody as a protective measure, until Mr. Albuquerque receives the psychological treatment necessary to control his violent impulses. Deborah wiped away non-existent tears, her performance worthy of a primetime drama. On the other side, Christian clenched his fists under the table, struggling to maintain his composure. When it was his turn, Richard presented a methodical and devastating approach. Your Honor, before we begin, I would like to register our concern regarding the impartiality of this court, given that Your Honor and Mrs. Deborah share social circles, including joint attendance at least 5 charity events in the last 2 years. A murmur ran through the room. The judge, visibly uncomfortable, adjusted his tie. That allegation is irrelevant, counsel. I know half of New York City socially. Proceed with substantial arguments. As Your Honor wishes, Richard agreed, knowing the seed of doubt had been planted. I would then like to present the following documents. Medical report from St. Jude's Hospital confirming severe malnutrition in both children. Testimony from Child Protective Services Counselor Dr. Marianne Summers. Sworn statement from housekeeper Zelda Pereira. And this video recovered from the Albuquerque Mansion's security system dated 3 weeks ago. The video, displayed on the courtroom monitors, showed Deborah yelling at Sophia, forcing her to clean the floor while carrying Matthew on her back. At one point, she clearly spat on the freshly cleaned floor, laughing as she ordered the girl to clean it again. The recording was short, only 2 minutes, but devastating in its content. Deborah visibly paled. Her lawyer immediately protested. Your Honor, this recording was not previously presented. We request its exclusion from the record. The judge, however, seemed disturbed by what he had just witnessed. Objection denied. Where did this recording come from, Mr. Richard? From the internal security system of the residence. Your Honor, Mr. Albuquerque was unaware of the existence of these images until yesterday, when the technician responsible for the system, after seeing the news, contacted him offering the recordings that had been automatically stored in the cloud. Deborah whispered furiously with her lawyer, who tried to regain control of the situation. Your Honor, these images may have been manipulated. We request a forensic analysis before they are considered as evidence. Granted, the judge agreed. But until then, we will continue with the testimonies. Is Dr. Marianne Summers present? The CPS counselor entered the room, her professional demeanor impeccable. Her testimony about Sophia's psychological state and the revelations made by the girl cast more shadows on Deborah's carefully constructed image. The child shows all signs of prolonged abuse, constant fear, excessive submission, obsessive concern for the well-being of her younger brother. In my 20 years of experience, I have rarely seen such a severe case of psychological manipulation combined with physical neglect. Next to testify was Dr. Maurice Reynolds, the family pediatrician. Matthew's nutritional state was alarming, he explained gravely. A 10-month-old baby weighing the equivalent of a 5-month-old. Sophia also showed clear signs of chronic malnutrition, consistent with months of inadequate feeding. With each new testimony, the judge's expression hardened. Deborah's lawyer desperately tried to discredit the witnesses, but the volume of evidence became impossible to ignore. Then came the moment no one expected. The courtroom door opened, and Nurse Camilla entered, accompanied by the bailiff. Your Honor, we have an additional witness who requests to be heard, the officer announced. Who are you? The judge asked, intrigued. Camilla Ferreira, head pediatric nurse at St. Jude's Hospital. She introduced herself in a firm voice. I bring information that I believe is relevant to this case. The judge pondered for a moment, then nodded. Proceed. Camilla then recounted how, during her shift the night before the hospital escape, she had surprised Deborah trying to sneak into the room where the children were. She was wearing a medical coat, that clearly didn't belong to her and carried a large bag. When I confronted her, she claimed to be a doctor from another floor, but her ID badge was visibly fake. I called security, but she managed to flee before they arrived. That's absurd, Deborah exclaimed, standing up. This woman is lying. I have the hospital security camera footage confirming my account, Camilla calmly retorted, handing a USB drive to the bailiff. And furthermore, inside the bag she abandoned while fleeing, we found this. A murmur ran through the room as the contents were revealed. An unlabeled medicine bottle, syringes, and fake documents already filled out for a supposed transfer of the Albuquerque siblings to a clinic in upstate New York. We sent the bottle for laboratory analysis, Camilla continued. It contained a powerful sedative, in a dose sufficient to render both children unconscious for hours. Chaos erupted in the room. Deborah's lawyer demanded the invalidation of that testimony, alleging improper procedures. Deborah shouted accusations of conspiracy. The reporters present frantically recorded every word. Order! The judge pounded his gavel several times. This court will not tolerate a disturbance. When silence finally returned, the magistrate announced, given the seriousness of the new evidence, I order the immediate suspension of the restraining order against Mr. Albuquerque and grant him temporary custody of the children. Furthermore, he continued, looking severely at Deborah, I order the preventive arrest of Mrs. Deborah Albuquerque on suspicion of attempted kidnapping, falsification of documents, and child abuse. Your Honor, Deborah's lawyer protested, my client has the right to respond out of custody. Not when she represents a clear danger to the victims, the judge retorted firmly. Officers, carry out the order. 2 police officers approached Deborah, who looked at the scene in disbelief. When they tried to handcuff her, she exploded. You can't do this to me. Do you know who I am? Christian, she screamed, looking directly at her ex-husband. You'll pay for this. I'll destroy you and those damn children. Her mask of a suffering victim had completely disappeared, revealing the true face that Sophia and Matthew knew so well. Television cameras captured every second of the breakdown, transmitting live across the United States the transformation of the loving stepmother into the out-of-control woman threatening children in open court. As Deborah was removed from the room, still screaming threats, Christian remained seated, a strange calm washing over him. The nightmare wasn't over. Investigations, lawsuits, and recovery were still to come, but the truth was finally beginning to prevail. Congratulations, Richard murmured, patting his shoulder. Phase 1 complete. Christian merely nodded, thinking of his children waiting for news at the hospital. Let's get the children. I want to take them home. A week later, the Albuquerque mansion in the Upper East Side had been completely transformed. The children's rooms were redecorated exactly as they were before Deborah. Photos of Felicity once again occupied prominent places on the walls, and the trusted staff, Mrs. Zelda at the helm, returned to care for the family routine. Sophia, still recovering physically and emotionally, had begun to smile shyly again, especially during Camilla's daily visits, who had become a dear friend. Matthew, responding miraculously well to treatment, already showed the typical vigor of a healthy baby, filling the house with his babbles and laughter. Christian re-evaluated his priorities. He drastically reduced his travels, delegating more responsibilities to regional directors. He now worked primarily from home, determined to be present for every moment of his children's recovery. The investigation into Felicity's death had been reopened, especially after the discovery of messages on Deborah's phone discussing details of the accident, with a number traced back to her disappeared brother. Although still without conclusive evidence, authorities considered Deborah the primary suspect in a case they were now investigating as premeditated crime. That sunny Sunday afternoon, as Sophia played with Matthew in the garden under Mrs. Zelda's watchful eye, Christian received an unexpected visit. Camilla appeared out of her nurse's uniform, bringing a homemade chocolate cake. I hope I'm not bothering you, she said shyly. I promised Sophia I'd make my special cake when she was home. You never bother, Christian replied sincerely. In fact, your presence has been crucial to their recovery. Together they watched Sophia chasing a butterfly, while Matthew tried to crawl on the soft grass. The scene, so simple and yet so miraculous after everything they had been through, deeply moved Christian. "You know," he commented, "when I found my children in that state, I thought we would never overcome this trauma. I thought Deborah had destroyed something irrecoverable in us." "Children are incredibly resilient," Camilla observed, her eyes following Sophia with affection. "And true love has a restorative power that people like Deborah will never understand." Christian nodded, reflecting on her words. "My family was broken twice, first with Felicity's departure, then with Deborah's betrayal. But now I realize we still have much to rebuild together." "And you're not alone on this journey," Camilla reminded him with a gentle smile. Sophia noticed the nurse's presence and ran towards her, shouting excitedly, "Aunt Camilla! Did you bring the cake?" "Of course, little one." Camilla knelt to hug the girl. "A promise is a promise." Christian watched the interaction with a growing sense of gratitude. Amidst the storm that had almost destroyed his family, unexpected allies emerged. Louisa with her keen intuition, Mrs. Zelda with her unwavering loyalty, Dr. Marianne with her compassionate professionalism, and Camilla, who had risked her job to protect 2 children she barely knew. Life continued, not without scars but with the promise of better days. Deborah would face justice for her crimes. The children would reclaim their stolen childhood, and perhaps, just perhaps, new possibilities for happiness would emerge for all of them. That night, after putting the children to sleep in their own rooms, no longer in the back room, Christian did something he hadn't done in a long time. He sat on the edge of Sophia's bed and began to read her a story. "Daddy," Sophia interrupted after a few minutes, "Deborah's never coming back, is she?" "No, princess," he assured, stroking her hair. "She'll never hurt you again. And you won't travel so much anymore?" "Only when absolutely necessary. And you'll always come with me." Sophia smiled, her eyes already heavy with sleep. "I think Mommy would be happy to see us like this again." Christian felt a lump in his throat. "I'm sure she would, my love." "Daddy," Sophia murmured, almost asleep, "do you think Aunt Camilla can come more often? She makes us remember Mommy." "In a good way." The innocent observation deeply touched Christian. "Of course she can, princess, as many times as you want." When Sophia finally fell asleep, Christian remained there watching his daughter breathe peacefully, a simple luxury that had almost been stolen from him. In the next room, Matthew also slept serenely in his crib, making up for lost time in a childhood that had barely begun. The Albuquerque mansion, once transformed into a prison by Deborah, was gradually returning to being a home. The walls that had witnessed so much suffering now echoed again with children's laughter. The family, though incomplete by Felicity's eternal absence, found its way back to the light. And Christian, sitting in the dimness of his daughter's room, made a silent promise. Love, that powerful feeling Deborah had tried to destroy with her cruelty, would always be the driving force of that house, because no power in the world was greater than a father's love for his children, a love that had arrived in time to save them and would now guide them to a future of healing and hope.